Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Valspar Championship, updated picks, weather report, ownership, and obviously your viewer questions. Joining me to break this all down coming up here in a bit is Reid Fowler at Reid T. Fowler from DK Live. You can watch him on there most days of the week and up at dkplaybook.com. But first, I do want to let everyone know to smash that like button. Goes a long way to help keeping the show free. And after the fact, if you're watching this on replay or have access to the comment section, not the live chat, the comment section, I want you to tell me, after the smash the like, leave your DraftKings handle, and tell me which player you think will be the most owned at the Valspar Championship this week. Reid, let's bring you in right now. Did you take a look at the weather report by chance?
Yeah, I actually just pulled it up as you were saying that. And again, this switch isn't going to be as drastic, obviously, as Sawgrass moving from May to March. But there are going to be some winds, I think, later in the afternoon. So a potential T-draw that a lot of actually my picks, coincidentally, when I was doing it earlier, come from that AM, PM. It looks like Thursday, you're getting some gusts around 2 to 3 p.m. On Thursday, and then Friday, not as bad as we usually see, right? This is usually a windy course, so it's not as bad, but if I were to lean one way, AM, PM stack for me.
Yeah, so that's the way that I'm leaning too. When I released my betting cheat sheet, which you can find up on my Facebook page, facebook.com/thepme, or in the description of this video, you'll see that I really leaned heavily towards my first round leader plays as AM. So if you're playing Showdown on round 1, I would lean AM. It's not to say the guys in the PM can't have good rounds, obviously, but Reid kind of hit it in the head. I threw the link to the weather station that I'm using right next to the course into the live chat of this show right now if people want to go check that out. But you kind of hit it on the head. Until like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it's going to be pretty calm conditions, to be perfectly honest with you. Then it gets up to gusts around 20 miles per hour for that later wave. So the second wave will go off around 12:30, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and some of them might just walk into a bunch of wind. I don't know how difficult it's going to make it, whether it has any impact or not. But like I said, I played some first-round leaders with that AM wave coming out of the gate early, and I actually made 6 of my 20 lineups this week, all AM, PM stack. So guys who are playing the morning on Thursday, the collection of those 6 guys, I made 6 lineups just looking that way. Do you think you're going to adjust any lineups to go with that stack, or like you said, did it just naturally happen for you?
Yeah, it just naturally happened for me. But like you were mentioning, right, this Florida course isn't like the usual Florida courses that we see. It's tree line. It's sort of in the mountains. Well, mountains, right? I mean, not really in the mountains, but in the woods. It's not necessarily that flat either. So if there are any winds that do come up, I mean, how much is it going to affect these guys? I usually don't do it as much, especially if a windy course like this, or a course that is affected by weather as much as a Valspar has been in the past. I wouldn't affect it that much, just because you don't want to lean off of some guys that you really like that might be in that PM draw. But it's not going to affect it too much.
That's why I ended up isolating in just a few lineups to play that stack. Like, I like Danny Willett this week. I like Adam Schenk this week as guys at the bottom, but they're not a part of that AM wave, so they didn't make that collection of lineups that I put out. KH Lee was in that mix. And actually, Seb Straka was one that, the more digging that I did in, he allows you access to the very top end. Like, I went mainly with Webb, Stenson, and Jason Kokrak, and a bit of Jim Furyk, bit of Keegan Bradley, a bit of Sergio Garcia as well as sort of secondary plays amongst my core. But I used a little bit of John Rahm as sort of an outlier at the top, because it seems like very few people are going to use him. And then Seb Straka really allows you to build a stars and scrubs lineup that I know Dustin Johnson is going to be highly owned this week, and maybe that means that ownership gets taken away from some of these $9,000 guys, but I'd imagine you're going to see more balanced lineups than normal based on the bottom end of this tournament, where it's kind of devoid of talent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're really picking at straws down in this range. I mean, there's some guys that are really low in that 6K range that we'll probably get to in a little bit, but I mean, if you want to go DJ, and you and Feinberg mentioned it on Monday, right? I mean, DJ is a guy that clearly is the #1 guy in this field. His striking his irons fantastically. He finished with a T5 after not really showing up on the first couple of days at Sawgrass. And if you want to take that difficulty corollary between Sawgrass, which you easily can, DJ is a guy that at the very top, you're not going to be as keen to go off of him as you would in the past, because you have guys that are below him like Webb, Sergio, Rom, that you could build an argument that's potentially against Rom not doing well, not necessarily playing here. But yeah, DJ is a fantastic play, I think, at the top. I think if you wanted to go, and it's just interesting too, right? If you wanted to go contrarian, I don't think he's going to be that low owned. You could, but you have to go in that 6K range.
Yeah, I have Dustin actually projected to be the highest owned player on the slate. So when you look at this field, no one's really feeling Rom coming off last week. People are still scared of Jason Day. So if you're going to pay up, it does make a lot of sense that you have Dustin Johnson to anchor your lineups. Then you can figure out the rest. Like there's enough plays in the $7,000 range or even upper sixes that you don't feel safe with. But if you have Dustin Johnson anchoring your lineup, you're feeling a whole lot better about it. And he showed up to Memphis. He showed up in Canada as a 5-1 and 6-1 favorite and won both of those events last year. So he can definitely win at 5-1. Yeah. But at this price tag, at these betting odds, and especially with this course being so difficult and not allowing him to use his driver to his full advantage, I think I don't want to say it's ever smart to fade DJ. It's not, because he's so good. But I have 0 Dustin Johnson in my lineups this week.
Yeah, me too. I just think the names that we mentioned, like Webb and Sergio, I think these guys, honestly, I think John Rahm, I mean, if you wanted to go GVP, like you mentioned, a lot of guys will look at what happened on Sunday and moving into this tournament and say, look, he's not going to do that well, or, he wants to use driver when he can. So this is not really a driver course. Off the tee is not a key statistic that's really that important as much as approach. And he hasn't been that well at approach. But with all the top fives that this guy gets, he can get those birdies. He can score on those par fives. I think if you wanted to fade DJ, you'd be perfectly fine doing that, because Sergio and the Roms, even the Casey, right? We talk about the tee draws. Casey has that PMAM. If someone's potentially looking at reasons not to play Casey, more importantly, I'd be more on him. Again, I don't think he's going to be low owned. I think you get him in that probably 15 to 17% range. But yeah, he's strong with his approaches as well.
Yeah, so what are you looking for in terms of one and done? I went with Henrik Stenson. Feinberg went with Rafa Cabrera-Bello. The Cuss coming off a win with Rory McIlroy. Picks Patrick Reed this week. Who are you going with?
So all that being said, I like Rom. I got a couple of goose eggs in my one and dones. I picked Xander last week. I think Paul Casey at Sony. So I got a couple of goose eggs with the DJ win at that WGC. So I'm not doing too bad. But I'm going John Rahm just because I don't think a lot of players or a lot of people are going to be on him.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. He's definitely going to be a contrarian play, but almost like DJ. I know that I'm using a little bit of Rahm, but I just feel like he's the guy that's going to fall through the cracks. It's more of an ownership play. Like 3 of 20 lineups, I have 15% exposure. I haven't projected around 8. I'll get myself double the field. And when Rahm plays like a moron and hits it in the middle of the trees and misses the cut, I'm not going to feel that badly that all my lineups are sunk, because they won't be. So let's go to the chat and see what the peoples are asking out there. First question comes from Matt Jones. Having trouble deciding on my last man in. $7,600 in salary help. This is why I provide a cheat sheet with the names, with the prices next to them, so you can just check those and save yourself the time of sitting around and watching the question. I appreciate you tuning in, but just as a time saver in the future, Reed, who do you like from $7,600 and below? Who's your favorite play?
Zach Johnson. He's going to be my favorite play in that red on 7,600. Like par fives, right? He's not doing that well. He never really does that well. But if you look at this course difficulty, par threes, obviously the one tournament potentially out of the whole roto that you see par threes really popping. Zach Johnson over the long form has been fantastic. Over the short form of 24 rounds, he's third. I just like him on these courses where you don't have to shoot, 20 under. I mean, we've seen him obviously win majors. We've seen him do well in these difficult fields. At 7,600, look, Zach Johnson's always going to be highly owned just because he's a name that everyone sees. And when you get him in this mid-7 range, he's going to garner ownership. So if you want to fade on ownership, I don't mind that, but he's going to be my favorite play at 7,600.
So for me, I just have a sort of a collection of guys in that lower $7,000 range. If I could find the $100 somewhere in my lineup, even if I had to readjust and get up to Sung J M, that's what I would do. He's only $100 more than you have left. He's 7,700. I think it's worth reworking if that's the way that you want to go. But then you're dealing with the Roberto Castros, Joaquin Neiman, Bud Cauley, all those sorts of players down below. Like, I'd be still fine with just taking KH Lee or Danny Willett. You're leaving an awful lot of money on the table. Maybe you can upgrade elsewhere, but I think that would be my approach.
Yeah, even Bud Cauley, I mean, like you said, you're getting in the territory where obviously cut equity or making the cut it's not that great. And Cauley coming off of that horrific accident last year, he's been playing decently. I mean, he obviously can hit his irons well. And if you want to save, like you mentioned, not necessarily going up at that 7-6 right on the money. There are a lot of guys. I mean, even Sun Kang. You got a guy like Sun Kang, CT Pan, where these courses where you don't need off the tee. You need these guys to be elite with their irons. And we've seen both of those guys be elite with their irons at one point in their career, even in the short form. So if you wanted to save and go elsewhere, definitely looking at Lee, looking at Kang, and looking at CT Pan as well.
Keelan says, is it a mistake to put more of an emphasis on driving accuracy over strokes gained approach this week with the deeper rough making a bad drive so penal? I mean, the rough here isn't all that long, to tell you the truth. It's about tour average. It's not like you're getting yourself into extreme situations. If you hit it into the middle of the woods, then you got a problem. But this is more of an angles course, a lot like Harbour Town. You can play fine out of the rough. Obviously, it's better to be playing from the fairway. And just going back and looking at the winners of this event, it all correlates to strokes gained approach. Off the tee is pretty useless, to tell you the truth. So I would not be leaning one way or another trying to get accuracy over approach. Approach is always king, more so this week than almost any other.
Yeah, I think if you look over the last 5 years, a lot of these guys, I think except for Spieth in 2015, have all lost strokes off the tee, right? And so approach is extremely important. I think if you wanted to lean any sort of driving stat, I think good drives isn't a bad stat to use. Obviously, that's not necessarily making the fairway. So if you hit either the fairway or the rough, the next shot, you hit the green. I think that's a stat that I'm looking into just a little bit, about 5 to 10% in my stat model. But yeah, heavily on approach for me.
Listen to 6 pods this week. This is from Kyle, and everyone is on Jim Furyk. Worth a fade with the high level of ownership, price, PMT time. I mean, if you just don't want to play Jim Furyk, don't play Jim Furyk. It's pretty easy. There are pretty equivalent guys, better guys around him. I mean, I'm going to use a bit of Jim Furyk. He's not like a core guy for me. I prefer Keegan right there. I prefer Stenson right there. I prefer Kokrak even below him. So you can use any one of those 3 guys if you really want to. I mean, don't force anyone into playing a guy that you don't want to play. And I doubt that Jim Furyk's going to end up with 30% ownership. I'm just look at the ownership projections right now and see where Jim Furyk is actually popping up. And I doubt it's any more than 15, 16%. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe what would you think that he's projected at?
Man, it's a good question. I think 15%. I mean, you see the increase in average salary at $2,000. But yeah, I mean, everyone's going to be on Furyk because of the course history, because we see that he did well last week and he's healthy now all of a sudden this season. So he's been playing well, right? He's been playing well, approaches great. And in this course where you don't need, like I mentioned, you don't need to get 20 under. He's a guy that's coming in that can save par, that can really get up and down. But like you mentioned, there's guys in that 9K range, like the Stensons. I mean, I'm not going to play Louis. I never play Louis. So you can fade him. But there's other guys that I'd rather play than Furyk.
Well, even looking at it right now, Jim Furyk, 16% ownership, Louis, 4% ownership. If that's the pivot that you want to make, go for it. Like, Jim Furyk is higher projected right now than Patrick Reed and Henrik Stenson and Keegan Bradley. So like I said, I'm playing Furyk over Patrick Reed. It's just more of a strategy decision not to play Patrick Reed this week, because I think that although the projections say that he's going to be 15%, I can see him sneaking up a little bit higher than that. So with Furyk, if you don't want to play him, don't play him. But it's not like he's going to be so chalky that, oh my God, you can't play this guy. I mean, he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Next one, play Sergio and DJ in the same lineup or fade one or the two. I mean, that all depends on you. I told you I'm not playing DJ. I'm playing a bit of Sergio. They're not. I have more Webb than I have Sergio. Webb is the guy that I have the most of that $10,000 range. I got a lot of Webb, a bit of Sergio, a tiny bit of Rom, and no Day and no DJ. That's the way that I decide to construct my lineups this week.
Yeah, I think you can do whatever, like you said, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to be in that 6K range where you got to depend on the KH Lees, which, when you're looking at what he's doing ball striking, he's been elite over like the last 12 rounds, 8 rounds. So that being said, I mean, you're looking at guys like you mentioned, right? If you don't want to play DJ, Day is someone that if you're getting Day at like 15%, 10%, we see what he can do with his irons and with his short game, right? Irons can get away from him a little bit, but we saw what he did on the weekend, right? Everyone was that he was, a point of contention on what we're going to do with Day, and everyone just liked what he did the previous week, and then he played really well. And so if you want to play the around the greens, if you want to play the short game angle, like you mentioned, a lot of people aren't going to be on Day. So if you don't want to play those two guys because of ownership, or if you want to fade one, I wouldn't necessarily try and teeter a little bit too much in the 6K range and try to pivot that way. I think up here, though, like you mentioned, if I wouldn't play those two just because it leaves you less less chance to get these guys through, which I think you're going to need. But if I had to choose between the two, it'd be Sergio.
In the lineups where I didn't just play AM Wave exclusively, those 6 lineups, I had to throw in some other people like Hudson Swafford and just other losers to fill out the back end of my lineups. The guys that I'm actually playing in the $6,000 range when I have combined Wave lineups are Willett and KH Lee, the 2 that I've been talking about all week. I like Adam Schenk a lot. Kelly Craft, Adam Svensson, and Seb Straka. Don't call me Martin Straka. Down at $6,200. He's actually been gaining a ton with his approaches lately. Played really well in Puerto Rico a few weeks back too. That he is the salary savings that if you want to go with it, he's completely unsafe. But if you did want to jam in DJ and Sergio, those are the types of guys that you need to balance the rest of your roster out with.
Yeah, I didn't want to play Swafford. But everything that I was looking at said that Swafford, it rates out nicely in my stat model. He's a guy that can easily miss the cut. But he's been really good. He's been really good with his par 5 and par 3 scoring. Especially the par 3 scoring. And if there's any tournament that I'm going to weigh par 3 scoring, it's going to be here. So Swafford is the one guy that if you didn't mention it, I was going to mention.
Would you go stars and scrubs or balanced approach this week, say mostly in the 8K range? That's from Smoke and Guns. That's all personal preference. I think that fewer people are going to play stars and scrubs than normal this week because the scrubs are so bad. So the contrarian move might be to build one of those Dustin Sergio lineups and go about your way, because I think a lot of people will start with like Sergio or Webb Simpson, try to get a guy in the 9s, take Snedeker, take Kokrak, take Knox, those type of guys, and then find someone in the upper 6s. I think that's going to be the most common build of the week.
Yeah, like you were mentioning, right? I mean, this field isn't that bad. It's obviously not as good as what we saw last week, but it's not terrible. I mean, we saw a lot of guys, WD or just not play early and withdraw on Monday, but it's not that bad. Even if you go the 8K round, I think JT posting at 7,900. I think there's guys in this range that if you wanted to go balance, you could. But to your point, right, there are guys that you can easily fade at the top that if you want to go contrarian, the stars and scrubs does work out.
Next question, where do you find the start times? You can go to pgatour.com. They're listed up there, or next to the names on Fantasy National. They have the Thursday tee times as well, so you can differentiate your lineups and find that information very easily. If you get a monthly membership to fantasynational.com right now, it takes you through Masters Week, and then it even gets you a bit into Pat Mayo Masters Week, the Heritage, which would just be fantastic. So it's a great time to seize on the monthly deal right now, especially if you're new to the site, want to get acclimated with how everything works. It'll get you in for the Masters, and the Masters field, up to date as of this moment, is loaded in right now if you want to start getting your early research done. If you plan on playing a lot of lineups on DraftKings or even wagering very heavily on the Masters, fantasynational.com, probably for you. Go sign up, become a member now. Moore or Kokrak? That is Kokrak for me.
Yeah, Kokrak. I mean, he's been so good with his irons. I mean, I was going to mention in that last spot you just did that this is probably the 6th major, right? I mean, we're talking about majors. This is one of your favorite tournaments. So, but yeah, it's going to be Kokrak for me. He's just been playing too well. I don't care what ownership he's coming in at. He's just been playing too well with his irons.
Would you fade Chalk Snedeker? That's from Jason. I don't think Snedeker is going to be as chalky as you might think. I'm thinking like 16% max, probably less than that. There's just, with the way that people are building, if you end up taking one of the guys in the $10,000 range, maybe you start a team like Dustin Snedeker and build the rest of your lineup out from there. But if you're playing a more balanced lineup, I don't know if you end up on Snedeker solely because you can fit in all the guys above him. Like Kokrak is going to be more owned. Knox will be equivalently owned to Brandt Snedeker this week. So if you take like Furyk, Stenson, Reed, Bradley, thinking all 4 of those guys are going to be not like super chalky, but like 15, 16, 17%, and Kokrak is going to be in that level anyway, you're looking at Snedeker at the same ownership level as like Kisner and Ryan Moore and Rafa Cabrera-Bello, and I don't think that's worth a fade by any means. If you like Snedeker, play Snedeker. Yeah, exactly. And I think what we see sometimes, right, in these bigger tournaments is that the elite get that spread of ownership. And I think that's really where you see that in this 8K range. Like you said, Kokrak, Kisner, Snedeker, RCBs right above there is a name that a lot of people do like. So you're not going to get a ton of ownership on Snedeker. And I think if you look at what he's been able to do, and this is another course where we talk about it with Zach Johnson, I think Snedeker lines up well here. So 13 to 15% is where I have him right now. So I don't think he's going to be chalk either. Robbie asks, thanks for everything you do, Pat and Reed. Well, thank you, Robbie J, for tuning in. Do you like Im or Dahmen this week due to the ownership? I have Im about double what Dahmen's going to be in the ownership percentage. It doesn't matter to me. I still like Sungjae more than I like Joel Damon.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. I think Sungjae is just, I mean, obviously, I think this year he's a better player. Just you get those Dahmen chalk weeks. This is not going to be it, but just those Dahmen chalk weeks do scare me. He's getting talked up a little bit more this week. I'm going to be off him. Just Sungjae, I mean, he's just been playing so well. I'm not worried about last week at all. He's just been playing too well this season.
This is from Travis. Can you play a balanced lineup this week? And if you can, who would your pick be to start in the 8K range? I would start with Kokrak. I'm fading Cabrera. I'm fading Bubba Watson. So that would be my guy. I don't think that if you're playing a balanced lineup, you need to start in the $8,000 level. Like, you can still have Webb and start there. You could have Keegan Bradley and start there with those guys in the $9,000 level. I don't know if there's enough value in the 8K to have 6 guys all right there. I think you're leaving a bit too much win equity on the table. Yeah,
I'm with you as well. I think Kokrak starts there. I mean, if you want to play a course history, if you're that, if you want to play that angle, Ryan Moore is there. I don't like where he's coming in recent form, but Kokrak again with those irons. But you're right. I think Keegan, again, just a note on Keegan. I mean, this guy has been elite with his irons. He's been good off the tee as well. So he's putting in the short stuff, and if he can get in the fairway and he can make one putt, just putt like you mentioned, just average. This guy has been playing extremely well. So I'd rather, like you mentioned, go up to that 9K range. There's a little more cut equity. You feel a little safer with those guys. You don't have to put in all 6 in the 8K range for balance.
Jeffrey D says, you're jinxing Kokrak again. And he used the incorrect "your" and capitalized jinxing for no apparent reason. And since I haven't taken Jason Kokrak all season long, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Except for that, the one thing I do know about you is that you are banned for life.
That's good. That was the first one. I'm surprised it took that long. The first one.
Jeffrey D. You're terrible. Good. He got other questions deleted too. He can go fuck himself. Only making one lineup. Should I wait weather at all? Probably not. I think that's more of a strategy that if you're playing like 20 lineups that you can allocate some, because you can burn some lineups at that point if it doesn't work out. I don't think that there's a big enough differentiation in the weather. It does look like there is right now, but check back in 12 hours and maybe it completely flips and you have to rework your lineups anyway. If you're just playing the one lineup, I would just go with the 6 best players you can jam in.
Yeah, and you don't worry about ownership either. Not weather, not ownership if you're just doing single entry.
Why is Answer out? That sounds like a question for the Abraham Answer live stream. So you can go ahead with that. Aaron asks, in the single entry, should I pivot from Kokrak to Ryan Moore? Kokrak would assume to be higher owned. You are correct in thinking that Jason Kokrak will be higher owned. Not significantly so, though. I have Jason Kokrak at 18.5%. I have Ryan Moore at 14%. So it's really not that much between them. And if you have a preference between the two, I prefer Kokrak to Ryan Moore, then I would just stick with Kokrak.
Yeah, and more if you just look at his stats, right? He's really gaining a lot around the greens, which, again, you want here. And the course history obviously suits him well here. Not terrible finishes, but, again, we mentioned at the top, approach, and that's Kokrak for me as well.
So these next person asks, this is a really fun exercise. Chris Beatty says, can you say everything you dislike about Webb Simpson this week to help drive his ownership down? I always like to do some pros and cons when it comes to everything. So here's some of the cons against Webb Simpson. So let's first start with his course history. He was 8th here last year. That's fantastic news. But before that, the 3 years previous, or 3 of the 4 years previous, because he skipped 2015, 41st, miscut. Well, that's not so great. That's not great course history for Webb Simpson by any means. Last week at the Players and at the Honda when he came 36, he was minus 4.7 strokes on approach at Honda, gained 2.3 off the tee. He was only gaining 1.7 strokes with his approaches last week and gained 2.2 off the tee. And if this is a course where driving matters so much, then you know what? Then maybe that's not a spot. The irons aren't clicking like they were. And he even gained over 4 strokes putting. What if that normalizes again this week? Now you're looking at a player whose best asset currently doesn't mean anything at this course. The irons aren't great. And if he just has a slightly bad week putting, he's going to miss the cut. What do you make of that, Reid?
Yeah, exactly. And I think PGA National is a good corollary, right? If you look at Honda, those first 2 rounds, he lost strokes putting, and Bermuda can be tough. And like you mentioned with Webb, and where we've seen him do well is he just really turned around his putting last season, and he just hasn't been there. And if it normalizes back to where it was, a couple of years ago or even the year before last, Webb is going to be in a world of hurt. And if you get Webb at this 10K especially like the Wyndham, for instance, and these courses where he does well, and you get him at a high ownership in this high range, it's going to ruin a lot of your lineups. So if you're heavily weighting putting, more so this week, then I would be off on Webb. And like you said, if those irons aren't clicking and he's in that rough just a little bit, then it's tough. It's tough going for Webb.
Joey asks, my models are really liking Luke Donald this week. What am I doing wrong? I think you need to adjust your settings from 2009 to 2019, and you'll be doing a lot better.
Yeah, no Donald for me. Sorry.
DJ over 25% ownership. I don't have him projected to be over there, but if we woke up tomorrow morning and he was like 33%, would not be stunned, because that always happens with one or two guys that, it just turns out everyone congregated on exactly the same guy. And DJ is clearly the best of the 10K guys, especially when compared to Rahm and Day, being a 5-1 favorite instead of an 11-1 favorite. I mean, the betting market, he's twice as likely to win if you're going to hit on the bet. So if the pricing isn't that far apart, everyone just might gravitate towards DJ. So I could see him being over 25% depending on the contest.
Yeah, and again, that's not going to surprise you, right? I mean, DJ is one of the best, and he goes into these weaker fields where, especially if he's, definitely playing the match play, probably taking off the week after that, which I think is the Valero. This is his last full tournament, really, before we start to get into Augusta talk. And if he wants to get his game exactly right, he missed a ton of putts within like 5 to 10 feet last week. And if he gets that going, man, he is going to obliterate this field. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in that 30% ownership either.
Let's see here. This next question is about Roberto Castro. And it says, my model, sorry, that was the Luke Donald question. Castro is a PM guy, but somehow shows up as number 3 on my fantasy national model. 25% Castro, too much for 20 lineups? That sounds about right if you're going to go with the numbers and go with Roberto Castro. He popped pretty high up for me too when I was like, oh no, this is not great whatsoever. So I have Roberto Castro 14% in 21 lineups actually. So I have him in 3 of 21 lineups. That was enough Roberto Castro exposure for my liking.
Yeah, I'm going to have 0 Castro. I like Sun Kang, so he's 100 more. And then even Roger Sloan, right? Sloan is coming. He's like number 1 in par 5 scoring over like the last 100 rounds, whatever it is, or 36, 24 rounds. He's been popping in my model, so he's 7,000, right? So obviously you get Castro right there in the middle at 71. I'm going to fade him and go with those other two guys. Stallings
or Hadley? I think the correct choice is neither.
Yep, neither.
Okay. My best play is $6,500 and lower. The only one that I used in that range is my main man, Martin Straka, better known as Seb Straka.
I got no one below 65. I'm going a little bit more balanced. I'm not playing as much DJ, so I have no one below 65. So go with Pat's pick.
Yeah, at 6,600, the only guy that I was using was Svensson.
Yeah, exactly, Svensson. I mean, but he's 100 more, so.
Yeah. Thoughts on Max Homa? Are you guys playing him? I have literally no thoughts on Max Homa, and no, I'm not playing him.
0.
Anyone on Sloan, Josh asks? Sounds like you're on Roger Sloan. His odds actually dipped. He opened at 90-1, and I was looking at all the other names around. I was like, what the fuck is he doing at 90-1? He should be like 250-1. He's now dropped down to like 125-1 because I think they figured out he was a bit overpriced, but he has been playing really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. Like I said, when you're talking about 20 lineups, and this is, again, we always talk about this, how many lineups are you doing? What's your roster construction? What's your strategy first? If you're playing 5 or the 3 entry max, then Sloan, he doesn't have to make your core. But if you're playing 20, getting him in like 2 of 20 lineups is not going to hurt you. I like the par 5 scoring. I like the par 3 scoring more. I like par 5 more than par 3, but I like him at 7K. He's going to allow you a little more liberty at the top there. So I like him.
Am I crazy to go 100% Zach Johnson? Recent form doesn't scare me. I mean, I think it's crazy to go 100% of anyone unless you're playing one lineup. So it seems like you're putting an awful lot of eggs into one basket with a guy who is not consistent whatsoever.
No, no. I wouldn't advise, like you mentioned, 100%. We had this question last week as well. I would never advise that. Again, if you're going single entry, then all of your guys are 100%. That's not rocket science, but I like ZJ. I like him not as much as potentially, the 15 to 20%. I'll probably be average on that. I'll probably match the market in terms of ownership. But if you're playing that entire like difficult course track, if you're playing that bogey avoidance, save par, Zach Johnson is your guy.
Well, I talked about bogey avoidance a little bit on yesterday's show with Bear Off. And if you hit the description, you can find the cheat sheet for the bets, for the DraftKings picks, all the shows, all the podcasts, all that fun stuff. Like the show while you're at it, too. And then when the show is over, if you get access to the comment section, leave your DraftKings handle. Tell me who you think is going to be the most owned player on the slate this week. My guess would be Dustin Johnson, but that's me. Maybe you think it's Jason Kokrak. Who knows? Anyway, you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks. I probably should let people know, too, that I believe next Monday's golf show is going to either be Monday night or potentially Tuesday morning, because Jeff and I are going to wait until the pods actually come out in order to make our match play pick. So it'll just be one show. It won't be the betting show and the DraftKings show. I think for match play, they kind of bleed into one another, because realistically, you're just picking winners, even as it pertains to DraftKings. So programming note on that, I do have a show with Drew Dinkmeyer about DraftKings baseball that's coming out on Monday that I think that people should really watch and get into if they're not even serious about playing MLB DraftKings this year. If like, you want to dip the toes in the water, it's a great starting point. We talk about it from a beginner standpoint, intermediate standpoint, and a expert standpoint, even things from like what are the most important stats for hitters and pitchers to how do I know what tournaments to select for my skill level in the DraftKings lobby. It's pretty comprehensive. Drew just did an excellent job with it, really schooling me on what I need to know. So hopefully it works out for you. So go tune into that as well. I totally fucking forgot what I was talking about. What was I talking about?
So did I. I was really into that baseball. I was thinking of like how hard it is to play baseball in terms of DFS. So
Zach,
I was into what you're saying.
How about this? I'm going to look at the pass. I'm going to sort by, go to Fantasy National. I'm going to sort by past 24 rounds. And I'm going to look at, I'll take strokes gained tee to green. It was bogey avoidance that I wanted to talk about. Now it's all jarring back to me. I woke up really sick this morning. I'm on a whole bunch of fucking Dayquil, and now my mind is all racing on me. I'm going to set scoring relative to par to the difficult filter. Instead of using strokes gained total, I'll use strokes gained tee to greens. The top 10 over the past 24 rounds on hard courses comparative to the rest of the PGA Tour. You're looking at DJ, Keegan, Casey, Moore, Day, Kokrak, Neiman, Sergio, Woodland. Is anyone going to own Woodland this week, now that I think about it?
No. I don't think anyone is. And if we talk about guys who do well in these shorter courses, right, can club down, Woodland is that guy. I mean, he started off well. He was a favorite in a lot of our lineups early on. He showed up at TOC at Century. But I mean, again, if you want to go contrarian, Woodland at 99 isn't that bad. So yeah, I don't think anyone's going to own him.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I got him right now as half the ownership of Sergio Garcia. Maybe I'll take my Sergio shares and move them on to old Gary. We'll see. He's won at this event, too. The other guys that have played really well on difficult courses. You got Rahm, K.H. Lee actually rates out really well. Russell Knox, Bubba Watson, Patrick Reed, The Glove, Russell Henley, Sung J M, Furyk, Rory Sabatini. Anyway, the whole point about this is I want to sort by tee to green and not strokes gained total, because that filters out putting from it, obviously. But it's the one thing that I don't like about bogey avoidance, that realistically, it's a putting stat, isn't it?
Yeah, and so is scrambling, right? I mean, that's those two. I mean, more like you were saying, more so than what you're doing with bogey avoidance is like you clearly have to weigh in putting a little bit too much. I don't, like I said, the way I do my model, I do my main key stats, and then I just look at with 0% weight on Fantasy National. I just look at what you want if there is a tiebreaker. So if you don't necessarily want to, if you want to fade Sergio because you think he's going to be highly owned, I think looking at a full holistic approach on some of these guys and not weighing it too much into your model is the way I would go. But I don't use it necessarily as a key stat.
All right. Based on the weather report, are you guys favoring the early stack for tomorrow's showdown? The answer is yes. If you wanted a bigger explanation, go to the very beginning of this video when Reed and I talked about the actual weather report. No one is talking about Patrick. Is he viable at this course? I assume you're talking about Patrick Reed, not me or Patrick Rogers, but Reed's going to be owned. He's come second here 2 of the past 4 years. People are going to own Patrick Reed. They might be scared off by the Ander curse, although, have you noticed what Tim has been doing to make sure that his one and done works?
Yeah, he's picking the favorite, right?
He's picking the favorite, and then as the tournament goes along, he changes. Like he's locked in with his pick before Thursday, but then he just starts throwing out there into the ether, like, "Oh, I think this guy's going to win. I think this guy's going to win." But the guy that he always says is going to win is never the guy that he originally picked.
It's not a bad strategy, or if you really think about it.
Well, it's great.
Really course correcting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's picking the guy, then he's cursing everyone else, and his guy keeps winning. But March Madness has been such a terrible start for him. He called the game over last night, and just now it didn't work at all. He's 0 for 2, and Even on the weekend, even on Sunday, he cursed poor Michigan into oblivion. That allowed his other picks to really come through. So this multi-sport, different player, and or cursing is like next level stuff that he's up to. So you got to watch out for that this weekend. Choice between Kokrak and Kisner. Which way would you lean? I'm using Kokrak. I'm not using Kisner, so Kokrak for me.
Yeah, I think if you just look at what Kokrak's been able to do, Kisner not a bad pivot, but I'd rather go Kokrak.
Well, the big thing about Kokrak, and I think I went over this. Like I said, I'm dealing with a bit of a flu here. I can't remember a fucking thing. But with Kokrak, the putting hasn't been there whatsoever. He's the anti-Lucas Glover. Like, Glover had all these top tens mainly because he kept putting like plus 4.5, plus 5.5 on the greens, which is very anti-Lucas Glover. He reverted back and went minus 4.5 last week, and he missed the cut. Kokrak, 47th of the players, 10th at API, 9th at Honda, 37th at Genesis, -4, -4.1, -4.8, -0.6 in the putting department. You get one of those weeks that it's like 0.7 or 0.9, everything that we pray for from like Hideki. If that happens to Jason Kokrak this week, he's going to be fine.
Yeah, and look how many made cuts too that he's had. I mean, I think the last one that he missed was back at the Open in July of last year. So even though he's putting terribly, he's still making the cuts. Now, if we get him at this higher at 86, opposed to seeing him closer to 78, 79 in the last few tournaments, salary-wise, that's going to hurt a little bit. But the man's been so elite with his irons. Like you mentioned, if he gets that to that 0.6, that even that one, right? We also talk about it with Luke List and Keegan and all these guys. If he just normalizes that, he's going to be playing really, really well.
Let's see here. Pick two between Shank, Willett, and K.H. Lee. I'll go with K.H. Lee and Danny Willett.
Same here.
Okay. Where is Yi Haslov? Banned for life. Do you guys feel Brian Harman has found it after last week's performance and feel safe to roster him again or fading him? I didn't even realize he was in the field. Is he in the field?
I didn't realize either. Yeah, he's at 7K.
Yeah, pass for me. No, I don't think that he's found it. But maybe, yeah, listen, we've seen him turn on a dime and then run off some really good results. It's been like a year since it's happened, but put it this way, he was so off my radar, I legit didn't know he was playing.
Yeah, and this is probably a bad analogy, but I don't know why he reminds me of Mike Weir. Obviously, they're both short and left-handed, so that's not it. But he's doing this thing where he's just not playing well. His approaches, he's almost dead last in the field over the last 24 rounds with his approaches. Again, I mentioned the guys that I like around him at 72, at 71, 7K, so no for me on Harman.
Any love on Joel Damon? Here he loves this course. I have him as a first-round leader. Actually, I should probably run down my first-round. Would you like to hear my first-round leader bets?
I will love it.
All right, so they're on my cheat sheet, which you can find in the description or on my Facebook page, facebook.com/thepme. Damon actually leads that list. He's 100-1. Collie, Rogers, and Damon Collie and Damon 100-1. Rogers, Willett, both are 110-1. Denny McCarthy, who's actually the best in this field, short term over that key par 3 range. And that's when I'm thinking about first round leaders. Everyone knows that I always take guys from above 100-1. You hit one guy every 10 weeks, you're even money. You hit two, you're up for a substantial amount of time. And I get the each ways here in Canada. So if someone comes inside the top 5, I still end up for the week, and it makes it one of the softest markets out there. So Vaughn Taylor, K.H. Lee, Shank, Kelly Craft, and Straka. I really leaned AM early. The only guys that aren't a part of the AM wave were the guys that I really liked anyway, like Danny Willett, and I believe the only other one is Shank. I added those two to the list because I had bet them at their outrageous cost. I have them as top 20 plays. They're going out in the PM wave, so I don't have the most confidence, but hey, maybe I'm wrong about the weather and just, it happens.
There's probably no love for Grant McDowell, right? I mean, are you playing that?
There probably should be. I'm not playing him.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to say about trying to get in. We saw it with Stricker at the U.S. Open with Aaron Hills. I think there is a narrative, right, if you kind of want to go away from stats. And Graham hasn't been that bad over the last 24 rounds. He's like mid-30s for me in my model in terms of overall ranking. But I think there was a narrative to say that, hey, he wants to play the Open Championship in his hometown. So, I mean, I might look at him out of the guys that you talked about for a first-round leader. I haven't checked his number yet. But he's another guy that just looking at where you would get long odds, right? That he's one that for first round leader, because we saw him pop. We've seen him pop recently. He really wants to play in his hometown. So
McDowell's actually only 90-1 as first round leader. shockingly enough. So he's below every single person that I had already mentioned. And I don't like to, unless it's a major or shortened field, I don't like dipping below the 100-to-1 number because then I get out of my rhythm, I get out of my strategy, and it's paid off the last 2 years. It's not been doing so hot this year, although hitting Burgoon at CIMB really stayed there. I had like 4 bets that week, and that was one of them, him first round leaders. That helped me out over the long term, and now we're getting to the point where I need to hit one here soon. And these top 5s, they help you tread water for a week, maybe 2, but you need to hit one of these big ones coming in soon. Maybe we can rattle off a few in a row. Hit Jim Herman here 2 years ago as first round leader. He just went out and absolutely crushed it. He was one of those guys that played really well on those longer par 3s, just like Denny McCarthy does this week. And this bleeds into the next question from Joseph. If I missed it, what is the concern with Rafa Cabrera-Bello and where is ownership projected? Kills long par 3s and players burned a lot of people, but it's the players. I think a lot of that makes sense. I always prefer him on courses where there's a lot of longer approaches than, let's say, somewhere where there's wedges, so that actually works into his favor as well. The only thing is that there's a lot of sand on this course. I know they ended up coming like 3rd at API, but every time he got into the sand, it was bogey city. Now, he made enough birdies to compensate for it, but I just worry that we get into a situation with Rafa Cabrera-Bello like we saw with Patrick Cantlay here 2 years ago when he was chasing down Hadwin, that every time he went into the bunker, it was a bogey. And those aren't the only bogeys that you're going to make. But ownership-wise, he actually does look like quite the pivot play. Jeff used him as his one and done. I have projected as 8% owned right now.
Yeah, I got him around the same. And you're getting a guy that really, I mean, he's been great. He's been great over the last year or so. And he's hit a bad streak, right? His putting is not there. Like you mentioned, his around the greens game is not there. Right, he's decent, right, when he looks at par 5 scoring. But even when you get to that par 5 at 550 to 600, he doesn't do that well either. So you like the long iron approach. At that top 8K, though, he's just a guy that I skipped over. And to that point, like you were mentioning, if you want to pivot off of that, off of the mid-8s like Kokrak and Kisner and Snedeker, you don't like those guys because the industry is talking them up too much or we're cursing them. Whatever your narrative is, I think RCB is a fine pivot.
Top 3 chalk plays of the week. This guy used 5 guys at over 20% last week. Doesn't want to do that this week. I think it's going to be Dustin, Sergio, and Kokrak. Those would be my guess for 3 highest owned.
I think Webb might sneak in there a little bit, but you're probably right in the top 3. I think Webb, just because of the course history, I think you see here, just because what you see with the key stats that we're talking about, I think Webb might sneak in there.
I like Sung Kang this week. What is his ownership percentage? Well, I don't know what his actual ownership percentage is, but his projection I have around 9%.
Yeah, that's about right. Maybe it creeps up to 10, but about 9%.
Casey or Keegan? I'll take Keegan.
Ooh, yeah, Keegan.
Mullinex or Castro? I'll actually lean with Castro.
Oh, you're not going with your boy Mullinex?
I actually use them both, but if you have to pick one of them, I'll pick Castro.
Yeah, Castro.
Shank or Willett? Pick one. I'll pick Willett, but again, I use both these guys.
Yeah, I'll go Shank.
Knox or Im? I'll take Im.
Ooh, yeah, Sanjay.
Any love for Jonas Blixt at $6,200? Stats don't show much, but he got some decent finishes and top 25s in his last 2 trips here. I feel like if you're someone that uses Jonas Blixt, just play him every week because his stats don't make any sense, and he pops off once every 8 weeks and ends up inside the top 10. So he's not a guy for me, but if you're thinking about playing him this week, you should really just play him every week.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to go further down in that Pete Dye courses, which to an extent, this kind of sets up like a Pete Dye.
Yeah, it's not as visually weird as Pete Dye courses. It's pretty straightforward. Hit it here. There's a lot of dog legs on this course instead of like weird elevation changes or gigantic water traps in your face. So I think that it has the length and the same sort of like difficulty narrative as Pete Dye courses. But I think that Pete Dye courses, the reason that they all correlate so well is because they fuck with your mind when you're trying to hit your shot.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never play Blix unless it's a die course, so I'm gonna be out on Blix.
What is Murray like on less than driver courses? I'm thinking of burning some more money on him. Oh, on Grayson Murray. I had to jump off Grayson Murray. The ball striking just went to shit. It was good throughout like the first part of the California swing, but since he's come to Florida, it's been terrible. Yeah,
I mean, you look at his stats, nothing really pops out other than like long iron proximity. You want him on like a long driver course, especially a first round leader on those courses. But for me here, nah, I mean, it's 6,200. Like I said, you're probably playing that DJ stack and you're probably getting 2 guys up there at the elite. I'd rather go down and pivot off of those top guys as opposed to playing a guy like Grayson.
Who would you pivot off of Webb Simpson to? I wouldn't pivot off of Webb Simpson, but I think that as we've talked this through, it does seem like Gary Woodland is the guy that you should go to.
Yeah, especially if you want to also pivot off of Casey as well. I think Gary is right there.
Are you guys going to play Akshay Bhatia in at least one lineup? He's the 17-year-old. The answer is no.
No, I heard he put on like 10 pounds of muscle, though. I mean, maybe he's got that Brooks Koepka workout. Because he was like rail thin last week. We looked at him at the amateur tournaments, but nah, not for me.
You know he's homeschooled.
Interesting.
I feel like that doesn't turn out well for anyone.
No, it doesn't.
He's not going to interact well with the other people in his group. Stop talking. Homeschool. Give your fucking head a shake. Think Glover has a rebound this week. I think Glover rebounded last week, and that's the Glover that not necessarily we're going to see every week, but he's not going to continue to gain 5 strokes on the green. And what happens? Oh, all of a sudden he loses 4 and he misses the cut. He's probably somewhere in between, but unless the putting flips back to the levels that it was going through the end of California at the beginning of the end of California into the beginning of Florida, just no, I'm off of Glover.
Maybe he just had the yips last week because that's where all that stuff happened with his wife. But I think you're right. So we're starting to see normalization with Glover. He stats out nicely. You're going to see that because of just what he's been able to do so far. Rates out as number 1 in strokes gained par 3 over the last 24 rounds. I'm out on Glover too. If you look at his price tag, you got the Stensons there. We talked about the Kokraks and those guys. So I'm not going to be on Glover as well.
See, Bubba seems to be under the radar, probably less than 7%. I think you might get him a lot lower than that. Yeah. He's not in terrible form. He's not in great form either. He once again made the cut at the Players and didn't finish better than 35th like every other year that he goes through. It's just, I mean, if this is a course where it takes driver out of your hands as an important tool in your bag, then why would you ever play Bubba Watson?
Yeah, no, I'm out on Bubba. It's just like you mentioned, we just haven't seen it that much with Bubba this year. Par 5 scoring is obviously going to be there for him. Long par 5s as well. The 550 is going to be there for him. But just the par 3 scoring, I think, really hurts him. And the putting as well. We just haven't seen it from Bubba. So I'm going to be out.
And when you look at him, like last week, he lost almost 2 strokes with his irons and gained a bunch off the tee. That's fine, but that's not going to do it for you here. And let's see I know he has a 3rd here like 10 years ago. But, I mean, in the past 6 years, he's played this once and missed the cut. Like, I don't know. I think there are just better options in the 8K range. You can always make a case for Bubba Watson because talent-wise, if good Bubba shows up, he's going to be fantastic. I mean, I bet Siwoo Kim every week, and sometimes I even play him on DraftKings. But he's going to be like 8 times the odds of Bubba Watson, and he's going to be $2,000 cheaper. You're still not necessarily paying a premium for Bubba Watson, but it's not like he's cheap either.
No. And look, in the putting surface, we might be looking at his stats, right? Obviously, in recent, he's terrible on pull, right? He just does not do good on that surface. And so if you want to take that out of it and saying, hey, look, he's on a Florida swing, whatever your narrative is, when you're lukewarm on someone like Bubba at this track where it is going to play longer than we think at 7,300, obviously, when you're looking at strokes in off the tee, not necessarily there, but having to get in the short stuff. So it is going to play a little bit longer. So if you want to play that with Bubba, you can. It's just like you mentioned at 89. Nah, it's not for me.
Am I crazy to throw Cameron Tringali into one lineup in an early stack? Made 3 cuts. Hey, you can do whatever you want, man. Josh Burkett. Hey, what's up, Josh? Thanks for running the one and done. He says Tim is up to 63rd in the one and done using the Ender curse to his advantage. I would actually listen, I would be very happy for Tim to see him win like 20 grand in the one and done. That would be fine.
That'd be nice. You never hear the end of it, but that'd be nice.
Yeah, but he makes so many bad picks as it is that he can't get out of his own way. He can't. If he just settled down for a minute, he could really bask in the glory and the credit of making a correct pick, but he lost money at the Players' Championship somehow.
Well, I mean, look, like you mentioned, all the bad picks that he makes and all the stuff that he does throughout the NFL season, and even here at PGA, like he's doing all of us a service by giving us his picks, and especially his one and done early, so we can pivot off of that. So yeah, I wouldn't mind. Cuss getting a number 1 here in the one and done.
I heard you mention Nick Taylor, but what are your thoughts on Nick Watney? 9 of 9 and cuts made here. I really didn't like what I saw from Watney last week. He was 100% putting and just awful with his irons. I'll take a pass on Watney.
Pass on Watney. He was someone that earlier in the week that I was looking at a little bit closely, but like you mentioned, like all of it came through putting, and we know like how much that can switch for the positive. That can also switch just as easy for the negative. So out on Watney.
Do you like Henley at all this week? Amway, of course, seems to set up well for his game. Thanks. He's fine. I just prefer the others in the 8K range better. Like all the guys that are sort of around. He's 8K, right?
I believe, yeah. No, 78.
78, yeah. So I'd rather go with him. I'd rather go up a little bit. Like I used a bit of Brendan Grace because I'm a sucker for Brendan Grace. Like you can't use everyone, and he's just a guy that I don't hate, but I don't love either.
Yeah, he kind of doesn't really, like you said, he's like lukewarm, right? It doesn't move the needle any which way. Difficult courses, sure, right? He's good with his drives. He can keep it within reason in terms of getting it in the right spots and then getting on the green. So good drives. He ranks out top 15 over the last 24, but like you mentioned, him over Ollie for me, for instance. So that's where I would differentiate, but other guys I like in that range as well.
Kokrak or Rafa Cabrera Bayo for you this week, Reid? I am going Kokrak.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Thoughts on Austin Connelly at $6,000? He's done well on the Euro Tour, and I don't know much else about him. He's Canadian. You can go on that, and I don't even know really how well he's done on the European Tour. He's like okay on the European Tour, so I'll take a pass on old Austin Connelly. And the chat just jumped on me. Here we go. Knox has been showing up well in my models this week. What is his projected ownership? His projected ownership, he is the one who knocks, and he is around 17%. Bit chalky on old Mr. Knox. I didn't bet him. I did play him a little bit on DraftKings, though.
Yeah, he's coming out nicely. He's standing out nicely. I think you're going to see at 8,100, Knox does get that little bump in ownership just because he's not necessarily – he was in that mid-8 that I think you would see lesser, but he's reasonably priced, and he's hitting the ball well. So he's one guy that I wouldn't necessarily worry about projected ownership just because he is playing well. And there's other guys you can pivot off of, but if you pivot off and go into that low 7K that we were just talking about, or excuse me, that high 7K that we were just talking about, you do lose some of that equity. So I wouldn't mind ownership with Knox this week.
Any love for Big Harry V this week?
No.
No? No HV3 for you? No
HV3.
No HV3 for me either. Oh, Tony D wants to see if we can get a Johnny question marks drop. My throat is a bit hoarse, but I can probably get a Johnny. That still worked pretty well. Thoughts on the Postman? Pass from me.
I mean, I think they're talking about JT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind him.
Are you using him? Yes or no?
Yeah, a little bit. 3 out of 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not. Thoughts on Henley and Im? I like Im. I'm not using Henley.
Yeah, Im.
With approach paramount this week, and every golfer playing their approach from the same spot, is it wise to place bets on longer odd guys who improve SG approach from last week, like Colley and Kraft? I used Colley and Kraft in a few lineups. I find it really hard to bet them as outrights. A top 20 on Colley makes some sense if you want to play a top 20 on Kraft. I have them both as first-round leaders as a part of my package, but you have to think that their overall baseline of skill, maybe they overachieved last week. We do talk about putting regression just because it leaps off the page to us, but there's a lot of approach regression and off the tee regression as well that maybe sometimes guys just had a hot week with the irons and all of a sudden it gets a bit windier, it's a bit colder, and they just don't strike them as cleanly. And when you have guys that are not consistent like Colley and Kraft, it's hard to put too much into that. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I don't think necessarily they're all approaches are going to come from that 175 to 200. If you just look at the dispersion of approaches, you do see a decent amount, like 60-40 probably leans towards a long, but you still see those wedges that come into play. So it's not going to be all that long approach.
This guy says that Kokrak might be Mayo cursed. I don't like that term at all. Banned for life.
Yeah.
That's what you get for saying things that Pat doesn't like. What's with Mac? Why are people sucking off Max Hama here in the chat? Is it Max Hama in the chat?
I hope so, because I have zero feeling on Hama this week. Just none.
Yeah. Casey burned me so badly last week. I'm a glutton for punishment, and I'm thinking I'm going back. Am I crazy? No, he's Paul Casey. He's a defending champion, and there's a reason he's priced in the upper $9,000 level.
Yeah, not crazy.
Thoughts on 5% projected ownership Chris Kirk? Solid on approach, ranks high in around the green, past 24 rounds. Nothing Chris Kirk this week?
No, me as well. I mean, maybe the par fives, but nah, nothing.
Glover, first in bogey avoidance and T14 in par 4 scoring. Guess what? There's a lot of putting mixed into those stats, and he was hot with the putter, and he's Lucas Glover, so watch out.
Yeah, par 4s, like I mentioned earlier on Twitter, par 4s are tough, right? So, of course, if you gain on those par 4s, then sure, you're going to do well, but not a key stat for me this week.
Spent too much time on my NCAA bracket this week. Should I just go all in on Neiman for one and done? I love Neiman. I bet Neiman every week. He's actually won at this course as an amateur in like 2017, so he's a fine play. I like him, but I don't think that there's ever a reason to use Neiman in one and done. Like, why would you ever go that low down the card if there's only 40 events in the year?
Yeah, exactly. He's missed the cut quite a bit, and just his putting has been terrible. So you don't have to use him. Like you mentioned, he's a solid ball striker, so clearly that can switch, but I wouldn't go that low for one and done.
Any love for Brandt Snedeker? Yeah, I bet him, and he was one of my core plays. So, yeah, I'm going to say I do like Brandt Snedeker here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sneds is good this week.
Hadwin screwed me last week. How many people will be suckered this week? I mean, Hadwin, we told you to stay away from him last week because he's lost on approaches in 7 of his past 8 events. The only place where he looked good was the Desert Classic, where he came second. And last time he played really well at the Desert Classic, he actually came in and won Valspar. So maybe there's a correlation between these two courses. I don't know. The recent form just looks like trash, though. Yeah,
I mean, he's losing so much through approach. Yeah, it's not for me. And he's 8,300. I think that's way too expensive for old Hattie.
Reid or Sergio? I would go Sergio.
Sergio.
Knox and Mullenix or Kisner and Svensson? I don't see why it has to be those two, but I guess Knox and Mullenix since I used both those people.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. I know you guys are mentioning him, and he does show well with stats, but has never played here. One guy not being mentioned is not. Thoughts? I mean, listen, man, if this is where you're going with it, we clearly like him. If we were wanting to big up Kevin Na, we would have mentioned Kevin Na before now. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, no Kevin Na. I mean, yeah, he did the whole stupid like walk before the putt goes in, but no, M is a better player. M is a better player right now than Na. Na pops in some of these shorter courses, well, in these difficult courses, but that's just not for me.
All right, let's see. Oh, not just WD'd from the Pro-Am, FYI. Pat, Hama is 26th, 10th, 37th, and 20th, last 4. Yeah, I know why people are on him. I just don't get what the love fest is. Like, the guy, to go, like, to be so in on someone who's like $6,300 is just crazy. Like, there's a reason he's $6,300. There's a reason he's Max Hama. Maybe you win this week. Maybe he screws you. I just, if you don't have, like, certain feelings about someone, then you're just not going to use them, especially when they're, like, scrub pricing. So, Matt Jones? No. Thoughts on Luke Donald? No. Thoughts on the rookie debut of that homeschooled kid? No. That was pretty easy. No. All right.
Yeah, no on all those.
All right, there's no more questions in the chat, so I guess we can get out of here. Reid, who'd you say your one and done is? Rom?
It's going to be John Rahm, yeah, the Raminator.
All right. Do either of you allocate funds towards satellites for upcoming major tournaments? Nah, I never play satellites or qualifiers or any of that stuff. That just feels like a way to burn all your money.
Yeah, me neither.
Like if I'm interested in playing in the $555 Masters tournament, then I will pay $555 to get into the Masters tournament. I'm not going to waste like $1,000 trying to get into it. Like, I just don't see the point of it.
Yeah, no. You're exactly right. Don't play the cues.
Now, you see this all the time. Like, I mean, it's if you're a higher stakes player, I think it makes more sense because you can play in like the smaller fields in order to qualify for like a fantasy football world championship. But I see guys bleed almost like what first place prize money is at this event just to get into the event. Like, I get that there's notoriety that goes along with it, and some of these people run sites that, hey, it would look great if I could put down fantasy football world champion. But if you're actually just breaking even by winning, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's kind of it feels like one of those carnival games, right, where you pay like $18 in the that claw game that gets you that teddy bear that probably costs you like $5 if you just went to the store. They're fine, right? They're fine, like you mentioned, if you play in some of the smaller field ones. But like you mentioned, just pay the fee and get into these bigger tournaments when you want to, as opposed to trying to get into it.
PJ says you want to give some 3 balls. I don't play first round 3 balls, so no. How about that?
Yeah, me neither.
I want to see some data on the 3 balls first. So I usually play second rounds and third and fourth round head to heads. For first round only, like I don't play first round showdown. I only bet first round leaders as it comes to it. I think that's the best way to capitalize on the first round because you get such long odds before we really know anything.
Yeah, second, the Friday showdown is really fun too because you get stats, right? Especially on Fantasy National, you get those in-tournament stats and you can pivot off of those guys or use that strokes gain approach, low strokes gain putting as guys that you can attack in those showdown modes. So much more prefer the Friday as opposed to Thursday.
And again, if you're going to play showdown, you might as well just bank on there being a lot of wind in the afternoon and just go with that. That's the thing that you're going with. So try to stack the early waves of guys in Showdown tomorrow. Same as first round leader. Just play the guys on the course early. Not guaranteed to work, but it does look like it is an advantage at this moment. Last one from Aaron. Kang or Sabatini? My answer is neither.
Kang for me.
Okay. Reid Fowler. Where can everyone follow your work and follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, Reid T. Fowler on Twitter. All the links and everything that I do is on that page. Obviously, DK Live, DK Playbook. Doing a lot of great stuff over here. Obviously, March Madness is coming. We have a lot of great contests over here. So tune in to not just golf stuff and my stuff, but also on the DK Playbook. A lot of great guys working on great stuff here. But Reid T. Fowler everywhere.
So, Evan says, on the Mayo to Cuss scale of insane, how about his 40% Hadwin? That sounds terrible. You should quit playing DFS, pal. This is the same guy who told me he went 25% Spieth last week. I told him it was a bad idea, and I think he doubled down and went 50. So, I mean, I don't know how much money you possibly have left, but it sounds like a terrible idea. You can follow me on Twitter at the PME, same as Facebook, same as Instagram. You can check out my cheat sheets for DraftKings and betting in the description of this video or on my Facebook page or on DKPlaybook.com. If you want to get into a draw for 20 DK bucks, smash the like button for the episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, not the live chat. In the comments section, tell me who you think is going to be the highest owned player at the Valspar Championship. There are still spots remaining in the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Open, so which means it's probably going to get smaller next week because no one decided to just... Interest for the Valspar in general is very low, and it's being reflected in the Pat Mayo Experience Open. I believe this is the first time it's made it till Wednesday with spots still open. There's 200 left. No rake, $15 to enter. I highly suggest that everyone go do that. And if you leave a 5-star iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify review with your DraftKings handle and something nice about the show on the audio podcast, you will also be in a draw for 20 DK dollars. You might as well take advantage of it. That's a free Millionaire Maker entry in 3 weeks' time when the Masters comes around. And if you become a member of FantasyNational.com right now, get the monthly package. It'll take you through the Masters, so I suggest you go do that too. I'm going to go pound some NyQuil, okay? Probably some Dayquil. I don't feel like falling asleep at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I got more work to do. Anyway, good luck at the Valspar Championship. I'll see you next time.